We're going to move on now to looking at some inventors from this time period, some guys that had a great effect on this period of industrialization. You are going to, as part of this unit, do a project on an inventor and their invention. But we're going to highlight a couple here who had some pretty far reaching implications in industry at the time. So let's take a look. First up, we've got Mr. Thomas Edison. Now, chances are of anybody on this list, this is the guy that you've heard of. Thomas Edison was a man who invented a great many things. You know, early movies you attribute to Tom Edison, the phonograph, and for our intents and purposes, probably most famously, the light bulb. Now, Thomas Edison didn't invent the light bulb. He actually perfected the filament in the light bulb, which was what made the light bulb glow. He made them last longer, and they were cheaper to produce. And so one of the big changes that you see during this period of time is the move to electricity. And that's going to have some pretty far-reaching implications in society as a whole, but definitely in industry, because now you don't have to have daylight to do work. And so inside of these factories, you could have electricity. Once labor laws come into line and you get the 8-hour workday, this leads to things like shift work. And so some of you may know people who work second or third shift, so a little different than what the normal workaday would have been back then. But what this does is it allows the factories to be producing almost 24 hours a day. And so that mode of production leads to more supply, which again will lower the cost of items that are up there. And we don't really get that without the light bulb. And so Thomas Edison had a big part to play in that. When it comes to inventions as well, he also had an interesting idea. They called him the Wizard of Menlo Park. He had what he called the Invention Factory, kind of a workspace that was set up where he invited inventors from all around to come and set up shop and to work there. In an era time where a lot of inventors, if that was your job, maybe 2 or 3 patents a year, his invention factory was turning out multiple patents a day. Turns out if you put all the smart guys in a room and one of those smart guys gets stuck, he can walk to the next door, bounce some ideas off of somebody else, and then have the process will go a little quicker with what he did. He was extremely dedicated to invention. The story is told that on his wedding night, his new bride woke up, noticed he wasn't in bed. He had snuck off to his workshop because he had a great idea for an invention. But a lot of the things that he invented, like I said, are things that are kind of the distant forefathers of things that we enjoy today, movies, television, those sorts of things that he's going to be able to do. So a very unique brand of genius in the course of American history. Our second inventor is Henry Ford. Now, Henry Ford's name becomes synonymous, obviously, with the automobile company that he started. This is Henry Ford in his Model A Ford motor car, a little different than what we would see today. His big contribution, though, was not inventing the car. That had actually been done over in Europe. What he did was he perfected the assembly line process for putting those cars together. And so what he did in his factories, he had this giant assembly line running down through, and he had his workers specialize in certain jobs, putting the car together. And so maybe somebody's putting the wheels on one side, somebody's putting the wheels on the other. But that person repeatedly did that job, which allowed them to get quicker at doing the job. And as the car moved down the assembly line, it slowly took shape to where it was ready to roll out of the factory at the end. What that allowed him to do was make those cars faster, and because he could make them faster, had more of them, he could sell them for lower prices. He also, in kind of a different term for the day, paid his workers very well. I think you probably make the argument he understood that by paying his workers enough so that they could buy one of the automobiles they were working on, he was getting some pretty great advertising when people saw those cars coming down the street. You could get a Ford Model A or his much more famous Model T in any color you wanted, as long as that color was black. One of the things that helps streamline the process is we're not going to be painting cars these fancy colors, which obviously is a little different today. You look out in a parking lot, you're liable to see all kinds of different things. But back then, it really helped to speed up production. Henry Ford turns Detroit, Michigan, into a hub for the motor vehicle industry. There's a Henry Ford Museum up there today that is a really, really cool museum. If you ever get a chance to go, it's got stuff from any era of history that you'd be interested in. He actually paid to have Thomas Edison's workshop moved out to this place, and so it's got a museum part, but then it's got a kind of a village part that sits in the back, and courthouse where Abraham Lincoln actually argued cases, and just neat stuff like that. But it's well worth going to see. His home is also there on the campus of the University of Michigan. So kind of a neat place to go and check out. Now that makes Ford obviously a very wealthy man, but really the revolution here is people look at his process and ask, why can't we do that? And so you really start to see people beginning to use the assembly line process in a lot of different factories, which again speeds up production. It's going to lead to a cheaper product, which people could afford to buy. There were even some business owners that hopped on and started to offer higher wages, like Henry Ford did. And so his incorporation of that particular innovation is going to be huge during this particular period. And so Henry Ford and the assembly lines are our next inventor. Our last one here is a name you might be familiar with. This is Mr. Alexander Graham Bell. Alexander Graham Bell is credited with the invention of the telephone. His story is a neat one, though, because there were several different people who were working on ideas for the telephone, and Alexander Graham